Water Department is fast-tracking plans to deal with receding dam levels. Now, several areas across all provinces are on the brink of a drought, and one water expert says South Africa needs to manage the resource more efficiently. Kevin Winter from UCT's Future Water Institute joins us now via our Skype line to unpack this story. Thanks very much, Kevin, for your time on the rundown. And, you know, one of the sentiments that were expressed by one of the protesting areas in the Eastern Cape in Butterworth was that residents, even those who don't specialize in water and what it takes to provide an area with water, even those residents had the feeling that it wasn't about drought or climate change conditions that were out of government's control, but rather mismanagement. What are you seeing?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, and that's an easy way to answer your question, that it's always many other issues that are driving our water crises across the country. Certainly, in a lot of the cases, it's not about the technology fixing the problem, but it is about governance and about the expertise and the skills that are required to manage water, both in delivering it, supplying it, and also in treating that water. So it's a combination of things. But I think we've got to start pointing more and more fingers at who it is that's in control of the technologies and how that's being managed, and then the governance systems that are associated with the management of those systems as well. It's a complex system, so let's not underestimate the difficulties of trying to work with water systems and water treatment systems. We often say that we need technical and engineering experience, which goes back in at least 20 years before you can really effectively manage, for instance, our wastewater treatment works. And too often we are finding very limited skills out there to be able to manage it. But there's a long answer to, I think, one of those very important areas we've got to be focusing on, and that is the human resources that are associated with managing water across the country right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And are we looking at sort of innovative ways of dealing with our water scarcity? You know, if we think about electricity and looking to alternative sources outside of coal, are we doing the same with water in terms of looking at perhaps using our salt water? I know that's a very expensive way to deal with the crisis, but there's that other issue around atmospheric water. Is that sort of part of what could be a solution here?
Well, I think we first got to go back to the basics, and the bulk water and at the level at which we need to supply it, in other words, the volume that it needs to be able to address a city or a town right now, requires to some extent fixing up the basics and to making sure that those are properly managed and we understand what's required in order to meet the demand for, say, by 2030, for instance. So it's that skill that I think is required, and we have to go back to basics. We have got some really good infrastructure in place, and we've got to ensure that that infrastructure is properly managed and invested in. I think a lot of these other innovative ideas are exciting, and they're important that we keep our eyes on them, but they're never able to manage the kind of volumes that we're talking about in a country which is growing in its urban areas. And we're going to need to have more and more centralized water supply managed properly at a basic level in order to be able to deliver. And many of these innovative ideas are expensive but are unable to provide water at the kind of volumes that we're looking at.
So before I let you go, and perhaps just as we round off our conversation, you know, we've heard from residents, I'm talking again about this area in the Eastern Cape, just on how their lives have been impacted by this lack of water. You know, no toilets are working in the city centre. We know the effect that has on working people who are in the city centre, on women perhaps in particular at certain times of the month. Just take us through again why it is so essential that we deal with and really properly deal with this issue around water scarcity.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on the right point over here. We often are so fixated on supply, and supply of water that is obviously dealing with basic needs of drinking, and often what's lagging far behind is the sanitation. If you've got poor sanitation, we have low productivity, we have the impact on gender, and we also have the impact on being able to attend school. So these are critical issues. It's not just about drinking water, and of course that's crucial, and I feel for all of these towns in the Eastern Cape right now and many other parts of South Africa that are in dire straits and have been losing water, as it were, through just simply evaporation, which is far too extensive and far more worrying than I think we've ever seen before. So the importance now of trying to make sure that water really matters. It's fundamental to the development of our country and to the well-being. And I'm not sure that we are taking this as seriously as we should and investing in our water infrastructure as we should. And I think it's going back to those basic, let's get the basics right again. Let's implement the things that we can and know how to do and ensure that we're doing that really well. It's so important right now.
Absolutely. We just can't stress that enough. Thanks very much for your input and giving us some clarity on the big issues at play there. That's Kevin Winter. He joins us via our Skype line.